A wild Terry appears. Hello, Rangers. Hello, Renegades. Terry here from Renegade Game Studios, sporting my Renegade Studios shirt today. We're painting some Power Rangers. We're painting Kimberly and Hart. A lot of pink paint is going to be slung today on stream. I want to shout out to a few people who are in chat on Facebook. Ruel, I saw you joined. Say hi. Let me know if you're there. Wiffle Master on Twitch asked me whether or not we're going to be painting eyes today, and we absolutely are. When I said we're going to be painting faces, it's one of those things where we have to paint eyes if there's going to be faces. I'm going to show you my technique. It's pretty simple. Hopefully you'll be able to replicate it. If you have questions ever, you can always ask me in chat, or after, if you're watching this as a recorded on YouTube or anywhere else, like still on Facebook, you can always drop in to the Renegade Painters group. The logo is right on the bottom screen right there. And find us there. There's lots of people who are willing to lend a hand. So thank you so much for joining. We're going to get started. I'm going to talk real quick. Again, we're going to cover a little bit of my materials. If you're new here, I've been painting Power Rangers on stream here on the Renegade Facebook page and Twitch channel on Mondays, and it's been a lot of fun. We've been learning a lot across the week so far. We touched on some Goldar dry brushing gold. We've done the Zeo Rangers, and now we're gonna take on faces. We're gonna take on cloth, which is something that if you've been painting a lot of Power Rangers, there are a few models that have cloth, but the main Rangers themselves, because they wear spandex, they don't really have that. So we're gonna be doing that. In terms of supplies, I have my regular water. I have a whole bunch of paints, including a bunch of pink paints. I've got my brushes, and we'll talk again about brushes as we paint, but you don't need this many brushes. I usually say 3 is a good number to start with. A good dry brush that's pretty sizable, like this. A nice base coat brush, something that's kind of big, that can help you give you some coverage, or even something like this, something bigger. And then a nice detail brush, something that holds a point really well. So something smaller like that. And you can get rolling with that much. Hello to Noodles to Go. Hello to Big Mac J. Hello to, whoa, that's a lot of Ixiptor. I never know how to pronounce X's when I read them. I'm sorry if I'm totally butchering your name, but we're gonna go with it. If there's a phonetic way you'd like me to say your name, I will happily say it. Twitch and Facebook. I'm so glad you have tuned in. So let's get started. I'm gonna talk a little bit here about my palettes. So I've got my water, I got my brushes, I got my palettes. Now, same palettes as before. I got a little tray with some paper towel underneath and a sheet of parchment paper. Now, real quick, I know right now sometimes it can be a little hard to get supplies, especially paper supplies. This paper towel here, I've got some of dry paper towels as well. I'm gonna show you. We're gonna break through. I'm gonna show you behind the scenes stuff. This is old paper towel that I used from the Goldar painting stream a couple weeks back. I just turned it over. I use every side of it. You can still reuse this stuff. Like, don't just toss it once you're done. Same with my wet palette. I'll let if I'm gonna re-wet it, I'll let it dry out. Just make sure nothing weird is growing in there, and then if it's still good, it doesn't smell funky, it doesn't look funky, I can add more water to it afterwards. If you leave it open, it'll dry out, depending on your climate, pretty quick. So, and then I've got my parchment paper. This is a clean sheet because I wanted to work clean, but I'll show you this. Parchment paper for the top of my wet palette. I've got my old wet palette parchment paper here. And I used this I think I used this on Goldar as well. I let it dry out. You can just give it a little bit of warm water. I'll pull out the thicker chunks of paint off of it, and then soak it, and it'll wipe off most of the paint that's on here, and you can reuse that too. So you don't have to spend a ton of money. You don't have to try to chase supplies if you're feeling like things might be a little tight, right? Or it might be really hard to get a hold of some of this stuff. So you don't have to like feel like this is, it has to be new and pristine and perfect. You can reuse stuff. Feel free to reuse stuff. I reuse my palettes. I wash them, give them a go again. If you don't have paper towel either, you can also always use old rags. Anything that holds moisture will be fine, and you can just throw them in the wash afterwards too. It'll be stained, but it'll come out fine. So let's get going. We've got to throw some paint on here, and I'm going to start with pink bases on everything. Both the Ranger Slayer and the Kimberly and Rebel Ranger Slayer versions, their pink is pink, but it's not, it's got a little bit of like, it's a grittier, darker pink too. So I've got a second magenta color along with the pink I used on the Zeo Ranger pink, as well as my regular pink Ranger as well. So this is Citadel Emperor's Children pink. It's a layer paint. I'm using it as a base, fine. And this is Murderous Magenta. Kind of makes sense for the Ranger Slayer. But I'm going to show you how we're going to marry these colors together so that the pink on the models harkens to that pink heritage that Kimberly and Hart Ranger Slayer has. But also I'm going to show you how to blend and marry those colors so that it has that darker tone to it. And we're going to use that also for the cloth. So I've got a sizable chunk of pink on there. Again, when you're putting paint on your palette, pea-size amounts. Start small. You can always add more. And then I'm going to take a little bit of this. And I might not touch this right away. I might not reach for it right away because we're going to be doing bases. The base coat, and I'm going to cover a lot of model on this, at least with the Ranger Slayer. There's a lot of pink on her. For Kimberly and Hart, I'm going to keep her kind of as she was primed, and we'll start on her face as to kind of get rolling once I've got this base coat on. Someone asked in chat, can you use a sponge? Yeah, you can totally use a sponge. In terms of what I've seen other people do, they'll use a sandwich, like an old Tupperware sandwich size container, and then put like a couple of sponges in the bottom of that, or cut them in half, like widthwise, so they're like half a thickness, and then put parchment on that. That works really well too. So like you can work with what you have, right? When I started painting minis, we used Future Floor Wax on stuff. It is a dark and weird time when products were a little more scarce in terms of like hobby specific paints. You'll also notice today I've got a handle, and it's mostly because I want to try to keep my hands clean today, but honestly it might not necessarily be, it's not a promise. I won't promise anything. So I'm gonna focus the paint. The pink is going kind of everywhere again. I like to make sure that what needs to be pink is pink, and then I'll paint on top of that. And because this Ranger Slayer model has so much black, I'm not worried about coverage for that. So I'm just going to paint the pink everywhere I know there's going to be pink, and then I can come in afterwards and add that black on top of that pink later on. So it's going to be pink everywhere. And it's okay if I can get into the cracks and crevices with that pink. If I miss getting it black on it afterwards, that's okay. It'll blend with the rest of the model, and unless you're really examining these, and these are game pieces, so I don't think you're looking at it like that. You're looking at them from the perspective of table presence and what everything looks like on the table. It's not as big a deal. So I'm putting the coat on. The cloak, I'm going to spend a little more time on making sure I try to get a decent amount of coverage, but if I don't get the first coverage or the solid coverage I want on that first coat, that's fine. That's normal. But on white, I can get a nice color on there pretty quickly. And we'll be washing a lot of colors on this model. So I'm not too concerned about it. This is not the final coat, but this will give me a lot of leeway in terms of working with the rest of the model. So that's where that is. Oh, Victor is in chat. Hello to Victor. He joined me over the weekend on the hangout. I had a hangout. If you're part of the Renegade painters group, I try to host a little bit of a hangout over the weekend, just so people can kind of get together and have some FaceTime, get some painting together. It's kind of like working out. If you have a reason to work out because you're doing it with friends, that's kind of what we're going for in the Renegade Painters group. To try to get people to have an appointment to get models done, get paint on them. So, yeah. So the handle helps in terms of keeping my hands clean because I'm all over the place. I grip my models all sorts of ways. I'm probably gonna pull this model off of this handle. You don't need a handle to paint models. If you want something that makes it easier to hold the model, especially if they have really small bases, some of the miniatures, particularly those in the Kickstarter exclusive box, like Finster, he's got a smaller base. The putties also have a smaller base. You can use things like two-sided tape, or poster tack, or blue tack, to adhere a miniature to, say, something like the top of a mason jar, which I've done. I've actually done that. It's nice to have something that's a little more substantial to hold while you're painting. It can be a little awkward sometimes when you're trying to get on the underneath and you can't turn it upside down as easily. But with a smaller base, you can also use like an old pop bottle or a small medicine bottle. Those work really well as kind of something that approximates this. And again, I'm doing this just because I'm going to try to keep my cans clean, at least not to smudge that first base coat, but it's not necessary. If you're careful, maybe a little less messy than I am as a painter, you'll be fine. Let's see here. Any other questions? I wanted to, as I was painting, I was thinking about it today, that, what would the Ranger Slayer playlist sound like? I would love to hear your song suggestions in comments today, because I think when I paint miniatures, I often, if I'm painting on my own, I'll throw in some music that kind of helps keep me inspired and amped, lets me get in the headspace of the character. And I was thinking about what does the soundscape for Kimberly and Hart, the Ranger Slayer, look like? And I think that would be, I'd love to hear your thoughts and suggestions on that. Maybe it's a lot of female punk bands, something a little edgier. Maybe it's something a little more emo, going into Evanescence and female vocals. I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. It'd be really fun. I think it's fun. Because I think that when I was painting a lot of when I was doing the first video I did for this game, I was listening to a lot of the soundtracks on Spotify, and that was really fun. And I think that it helped me pass the time. And I'd love to hear, if you're a painter, what you listen to when you paint minis. So here we go. Pink is just about done. She's looking very, very pink. Very pink. Knee pads, I'll make sure I get. Little strappies on the legs. Again, I'm not being careful because I know I'm going to cover the excess pink with black, because that's basically the colors we're using. It's a very limited palette. But we're going to do some really fun stuff with black and with white on this miniature to try to make her pop a little bit. And let's see here, what else do I have? I'm gonna paint the bow black, I think, and her glove is gonna be black, and there's a lot of black. Whew. And I've got her holster is gonna be white, so I'm not too worried about that. I can paint that over. It's underneath a cloak too, so it's not super perfect. Doesn't have to be super perfect. And pink looks solid on her. There you go. So there, I'm gonna let that dry now. That's the important part. If I need to do a second coat, that's fine. I'll do it the second coat. But you've got to let that first coat dry before you go on to the second coat. That way you don't mess up any of the under layers, because it can pull up paint and make a weird texture. Let's see who else. Any other questions on Twitch? Any suggestions for songs? Let me have a look here. I use a wet... Oh, Noodles to Go says I use a wet paper towel, parchment paper over plastic food tray. Yeah, totally. If you've got a lid for it too, it helps keep your paints fresh. If you got to step away from the table for a little bit, that's totally something you want to do. But do check on the quality of the sponge. Give it a good wash every once in a while if you're using a sponge that's reusable, just because it can get kind of grungy in there, and you do want to kind of keep it hygienic. Oh, let's see here. I'm going to grab for my bigger base coat brush, and I'm going to start with, so I have a couple flesh tones here. I have Idrian flesh actually, and let's see if I have any other ones. Oh, I do. I have Cardic flesh. These are two flesh tones that I very commonly reach for when I am painting miniatures. These are, I like this Idrian flesh. It's pretty neutral as a color tone. It's actually like kind of matches my skin tone too, so it's great for darker skin tones. For Rita, that darker tone, this works really well for her darker skin tone. And then I tend to mix it with like an ivory or maybe a white to kind of lighten it up for the highlights on the face, to bring the tone more. If you're looking for a paler color, I'll start with a darker and then just blend in like an ivory or a white to get the tone right, because it's nice and neutral. I can play with the colors a little bit. So that works. Tony Shade, hello on Twitch. Tony also joined me in the Hangout this weekend. It was really fun. He got a lot of stuff done. He showed off some of his, I think Tony was working on a really cool take. I've seen a few of them in the Renegade Painters group where they were painting up the Green Ranger models with the Lord Drakon style color story and motif. So it was really cool to see. So I'm just putting it's like that much paint on the tip of my little silicone brush. I'm just pulling out of the pot. It's not very much at all. I don't think we're gonna need a ton, but I can always add more onto my palette afterwards. And I'm going to do her face, and I think I'm gonna actually start a little lighter off the get-go because she's not that dark. And so I'm gonna pull a little bit of this ivory out of the pot as well. And I'm just gonna take just a touch. Again, I'm not using a ton of paint. That's very little paint. But it goes a long way. It's really highly pigmented. A lot of these model paints are very highly pigmented. They go a long time. And I'll show you the inside of this pot here. I'm scraping down to the bottom now. But these come full. And, you know, if you're painting a lot, you know, you'll use them. So I'll take a little bit of this beige and I'll blend it in. I've got this ivory tone. I like ivories as a highlight, especially for skin. The slightly yellow color, you can make your own with just a hint of like a golden yellow color and white. If you don't have a specific ivory paint in your toolkit, because the slightly yellow tone actually makes it look like sunshine on skin. It replicates that tone, and I think that's a really nice, it's a nice undertone to have. It's not a lot of yellow, but it looks a little more natural than just white. So there's a hint for you if you're doing like skin tone highlights, especially. Ivory works really well. It's also really great if you've got like I know Citadel has an ivory contrast paint primer. I used to prime a lot of my human miniatures in ivory because as an undertone, if I washed my colors thinly over them, the wash of color would sink into the recesses. The raised parts would retain. The paint would be just a little bit thinner. If you thin it with water, the paint would just be a little bit thinner across the rest of the miniature on those higher points, and it would kind of create natural highlights, and I didn't have to do so much work. And we've established that I'm a bit of a lazy painter. I like things that are done. I don't necessarily feel like every model needs to be supreme, perfect It has to look good from 3 feet away when you're playing with your game. It has to look good enough that you're proud of it, but you don't want to spend so much time and effort that if that model hits the floor, you can't finish your game. That defeats the point. You want to enjoy these minis. So I've got a wash of color on the face right there. And you can already see, because I undercoated with white, the paint is already kind of settling a little more in the cracks and crevices. That's a little bit of Idrian flesh mixed with some ivory. And I'm gonna let that dry. That's that first coat of paint. We're gonna pull out our makeup skills today. So we're gonna do a little bit. I think I'm gonna get a little bit fancy. We're gonna try some eyeliner. We're gonna try some lipstick. We're gonna do a little bit of blush. We're gonna do some contouring with bronzer. We're gonna do bronzer on her face. It's really just browns and pinks and reds and then that, so you don't have to worry about that. You'll also notice that if you look just a little closely, I wasn't particular about where that brown ended up. There's some on her collar, there's some on, there's some a lot of places. I think I'm actually going to take that color all the way around her head too. If I paint her hair on top of that color, a little bit will peek through like it's been shaved. We'll try it. We'll see how that goes. So I'm going full out on this here. So she's got punk hair, kind of the undercut shaved style. Very popular, like the half shaved hairstyle. My daughter sports it, so super cool with the kids. She is not listening to the Spice Girls, or maybe she is. I don't know. You tell me. And I've got the paint everywhere. I've got it on her hair. I've got it on her collar. I'm overpainting my borders again. I've talked about it before. We overpaint our borders because it's easier to match the colors if I know I'm painting to the edge of one border and meeting it. So even if I don't get that border perfect, the colors will meet and still marry quite well, as opposed to trying to match and line them up. It's easier to paint my shoulder here, the flesh tone all the way up past the blue, and then paint the blue to this line here, than it is to try to paint flesh to this line and then blue to this line and then just have either a really weird looking border or an unsightly like primer line as you try to like perfectly match it. It's not fun. I'm not interested in doing that. So that's happening there. Let's have a look here. This is still looking shiny. So if you're looking for a telltale sign of whether or not something is dry, look for shine. Shine is the key indicator for I'm still wet. Don't touch me. Let me dry. Let me dry a little bit. I might have put it a little heavy in that crack and crevice there, which is why it's still so shiny. If you paint in thinner layers, it'll actually dry faster. So I know I could probably have gone a little bit thinner there, but that's okay. Her face is drying up pretty quick. I did a really thin wash of color on there. Any other questions? Oh, Todd. I'm not the biggest fan of the Ranger Slayer mini. It's like a great mini, yeah. When I finally paint everything, I still want to use the Ranger Slayer villain mini to represent it's cool to use the villain mini for the Ranger Slayer. Like, your game, your way, you enjoy your miniatures however you want. It's an interesting perspective. Like, some people, this is a really dramatic miniature. The cape alone in the sculpt is really, really cool. The base is really substantial too, so it feels like she has a bigger presence. And let's be honest, the pink Rangers in the design of the game, they're just so good. Like, they're so good. Just incredible damage output. And so, how you want to match that up is totally your call, and it's a legitimate position. Let's have a look here. Any other questions before I get on to makeup? All right, let's put some black and white on our palette now. So this is a little bit intimidating. Eyes can be intimidating, and we're gonna go on a journey. We're gonna go on a journey with eyes today, because eyes they can be kind of crazy looking. So I'm going to show you how I do my eyes. I'm using these are my black and my white. I use a fluid acrylic black and white because I paint enough to buy quantities in this size, and this is artist paint from the art store. Fluid acrylic paints, look for the word fluid. They have no body. There's no texture to them when they dry. They try to even out flat. So if you thin them with a little bit of water, they're very comparable to a miniature paint. The range of colors might be a little bit different because they're made for artists and not necessarily model painters. So you won't have like 50 shades of green for the people who are painting historics with green. That's one of the things that you know, we as model painters have the benefit of. We get a lot of range of color, but you can blend colors. You don't need every paint to make a color, and I encourage you to play with your colors a little bit. Play with the blacks and whites and work with those in your paints to see what they look like. You can make really great shades and highlights with a 3-color blend, and you can get there pretty well. And it's something that I find that I'm doing more. It means that my collection of paints has actually gotten slimmer over time, actually. I started out, I may have said this before, I started out with a really mega, one of those super big paint sets, over 200 paints. I didn't use them all, some of them dried in the pot. It was really terrible, and it was a bit wasteful. Whereas now, if I buy a paint or two to add to a collection, I'll try to play with that paint a little more. I'll push that paint. I'll see what does it look like when I mix a little bit of white, a little bit of black, a little bit of green, a little bit of beige or ivory, or a pale green. Pale greens into purples, my favorite way to highlight purples now. But I didn't know that before until I tried it. So you can really just let your models and your paints like work with them. You know, you can do a lot with 12 colors. I'm going to be perfectly honest. You can do a lot with 12 colors. So we're going to paint eyes. I think what we're going to do to start with is I'm going to try to get some eye sockets down. Yeah, we're going to do some eye sockets, and this is how I do eyes, and it's a lot, right? So I'm going to just take this model, I'm going to paint white into the socket, and I'm going to overpaint that socket again. So like the white of her eye goes from her cheekbone all the way up to her brow bone. It's big. It's pretty substantial. And we're gonna bring this down again, so don't worry about that. But I'm gonna add it in here. I'm gonna turn her upside down too. So when I paint faces, I like to turn the model upside down. I learned this from a YouTuber and miniature painter called Oasis Rising many years ago. She showed me how to paint faces, and I have carried that ever since. Such great advice. You know, if you're right-handed like I am, painting the left side of a miniature across is a lot harder than just turning the miniature upside down. So it was a really great technique. I've done it for a lot of stuff. It works. It makes it so much easier. You don't have to always keep your miniature at the same orientation. It helps a lot of times where you're just like, what do I really need to focus on? It's good to look at the miniature as you assess it in terms of progress, but when you're painting details, when you're painting things, you might need to turn it upside down to reach the details you want to get done. That's okay. Turn it around. They're not gonna get nauseous on you. Todd, I'm a little nervous about mixing paints. I'm afraid I won't be able to make the same exact shade I need again. Yes, I have never matched paints perfectly, but I'm going to show you a technique to marry paint colors together, and that's kind of what I use to try to adjust for that. With Power Rangers especially, it's kind of, you have a lot of freedom. These miniatures will give you a lot more freedom because they're not uniform. They're all different. They're all characters. All the villains are their own characters. All the Rangers are their own characters. The putties, they don't have to look the same. There's a lot of them. Let them look different. It's cool. So you have that freedom. But you can also blend a lot of colors together. So I get close But you can adjust it two ways. One, if you thin your paint down as you apply a second coat on to try to match another color that you've made, you will have a better, you'll be able to see it by eye. You'll be able to go, oh, I mixed these two colors wrong. I keep a little book of like paint recipes as I go, just to like remind myself it's about like it's this color with a touch of this color. It's about equal parts of this color with this color when I'm working on miniatures, just so that I know if I want to go back or touch something up or something chips, I have that. But the intuition you develop by mixing your paints and understanding what colors you can develop from them, and knowing what you were using, that comes with doing, and you'll develop that. You will develop that I don't want to say intimacy, but it's a fluency. And you will have a relationship with your paints that makes you fluent in how they like to marry and blend together. The other thing is, if you're painting in thin coats too, the bottom layers will actually marry to the top layers because there's a little bit of transparency. So use the quality of the paint that lets you have transparency to get there. All right, so hopefully that helps you out, Todd. So I'm going to do eyeliner next. Now this is going to be fun. So and then I'm also going to do the pupils at the same time. So with the eyeliner, what I'm looking for is I'm going to try to hit black at the top of the eye socket where I kind of am going to approximate her eye to be. And then I'm going to hit the pupil kind of down. They're going to look a little bit like slits. That's okay. We're going to clean it up. So I don't try to paint dots. Dots are crazy. It's hard to match. If I can paint kind of slits, it's easier to orient them so they look like they're looking in the same place. And it's a little bit easier if you focus your pupils so that if I'm looking at you, my pupils are slightly, just ever so slightly, it's easier to err on the side of out than in. But if you push it towards the nose a little more, try to aim towards here, the miniature will look more intense, like the focus is closer, rather than like crazy cross-eyed if you put them too far out. So like if you're going to paint this pupil in onto the eye, you can, if you're not feeling great about the positioning after you put that first pupil in, just push the eye a little bit inwards, and then it'll give you a little more focus, and you can readjust. You can always paint over it too. So I'm gonna paint, socket looks pretty dry to me. I'm gonna paint her eyeliner in just above the eye here, like that. Boom. That's pretty severe. That's very severe. Maybe she'll have a smoky eye. We'll see. And then I'm gonna turn this model upside down, and I'm gonna do the other one. And go. Boom. Again, pretty severe. They're very severe. But that's okay. So that's what she's looking like now. I've got like this really thick line right above where I think the socket's gonna sit, and then I'm gonna just do her eye, and I'm gonna slit, just basically draw a line down. It might even hit her cheek. That's fine. Just like that. There's one. And I'm gonna go down this eye. There's the other. It's looking more eye-like, but it's still pretty significant. And she's like, she got anime eyes now. Like they're like this big. Like they're as big as my glasses. That's okay. We're gonna fix it. It's gonna be fine. We're gonna go out. We're gonna let that dry before we touch it again. But it's gonna come. It's gonna come. So we've got the face tone down. That kind of first layer. I'm not too worried. I just want to make sure that there's coverage there. We're going to be painting more tones on top of it. We're going to highlight her face. She's going to look like an Instagram Kardashian by the end of this. It'll be great. But that's her eye. And I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to do another coat because it looks like my Ranger Slayer is all pink up. There's a little bit in that crease there that's a little wet. But I'm I'm going to try to avoid that around it. And I'm just going to paint my second coat on, because I really do want to get this pink looking solid, especially on the cloak. This is where you're going to see streaks on the coat the most. And I'm just going to paint around the wet parts. I'm not too worried. As long as I can control the tip of my brush, I'll be fine. And it's not too streaky in those areas. And I want to make sure I'm hitting all the parts where I'm not happy with the coverage, and I want to make sure that the coverage is a little more solid and it doesn't look streaky. I want to make sure this looks nice and solid as a nice base foundation to work off of. Any questions in chat so far about faces? Any suggestions for playlist songs? Let me know. I'd love to see them. Let's see here. Do I spray, or what spray or oil do I use for a finishing touch, like a protector cover to paint them? Ooh, that's a really great question. So that's from Glory in Facebook chat with us. The interesting thing about protector sprays is they function in a couple ways. One, they protect your models from you. Once you're done painting your miniatures, you will handle them. They're game pieces after all. And the oil on your hands will erode the paint over time. Just whether that's just handling or just the natural oils in there, they work as a solvent. They'll pull the paint off slowly. So if you are gonna play with your miniatures after they're done, you want to give them a final coat. I like matte finishes. I have used Krylon matte finishes, like those stuff, the spray you get at the hardware store. I have also used, there's a model paint out there called Testers, and they make a spray varnish, like lacquer. I think they call it lacquer. They changed it. It used to be called dull coat. If you look on the side of this tiny little can at your arts and crafts store, the barcode still says dull coat, DULLCOTE, and it is like, it has a really beautiful finish. For smaller scale miniatures, I really like it as a finish protector, because I think that it's almost like a newscast filter. It's like an Instagram filter for your miniatures. So not only does it like seal and coat your models, it also is like this finish that helps blend colors together. It looks great. Super fantastic. And it takes down really high shine as well. So if you're using paints, different paints have different finishes when they're dry. And if you're using like a specific paint, let's say you're mixing brands, Army Painter, I find that their paints they finish a little bit slippery. Like there's a little bit of shine on them. And if I use an Army Painter paint next to a paint that dries much more matte, like a Pro Acryl paint, those two paints, you can tell there's a difference there. Finishing coat will also blend those finishes together. You can also spray with like a shiny coat. Oftentimes those shiny coats are much more protective. I used to do it on metal miniatures, pewter miniatures. They're super prone to chipping. Not fun to try to keep up with, that's for sure. And those miniatures, I would spray coat them with like a shiny coat, and then come at them again with a dull coat afterwards to take the shine down. And it's great. It works great. And they're comparable. Like if you're using a hardware store matte coat, they're not that different. The company that makes the Krylon actually owns the company that, like, they own Testers. They're the same company. They're the same family. So when you go to their websites and stuff too, you can see like that they have their different brands. They're the same. Like it's not that much different. I think the dull coat has a slightly different finish, but you can use both of them. I like that's for me who likes matte. You can also use a shiny coat as well at the end. Don't spray in high humidity. It can cloud your miniatures. If you're using a matte coat, high humidity can cause clouding, and the way you have to fix that is the way to fix it is to spray it with a little bit of like shiny coat, and then spray it again with the dull coat once that's dry, and it gives you that same finish. But what matte coats actually do to make a matte finish is they coat the surface, and then they make these tiny micro fissures in that spray coat. And those tiny micro fissures are what keep light from bouncing and looking shiny, giving you a shiny appearance. What happens is if it clouds, there's too many of those fissures, and it can look like there's like this white dusty coat on your miniature, and that if it cracks too much, and it's more prone to doing that in high humidity situations. And to fix that, you use the gloss coat, which works in the opposite way. It creates a super perfect finish to be shiny, and then you go over it again to kind of even that shine out by putting another coat of matte coat on it. So yeah, that's probably a little too much information. I could talk about techniques all day, honestly. So if you have questions, I'm happy to try to answer them, but that's the long answer. The short answer is you can finish them with a shiny coat or spray coat from the hardware store, from the art store. You can even use brush on as well. I've used brush on finishes. I like the brush ons for spot shine. Like if you want to make the Rangers helmets really shiny, you can use a brush on gloss finish. They sell them in smaller bottles at the art store. It works really well, and you can have like that little bit of difference, because those Ranger helmets are just so much shinier than everything else, and you can replicate that on the table if that makes you happy. So yeah, her hair is brown in the comics, but it'd be pretty sweet to put pink streaking in the front. I made that. Oh, Scott, good creative license. That's a great idea. I think that definitely giving her that punk rock kind of thing. Let's go back to Ranger Slayer Rebel over here, or Rebel Ranger Slayer. Her eyes, I've painted anime eyes on her, but I'm not gonna keep it that way. You can if you want. You can totally do that, your model, your way. So I'm gonna go in here, and I'm gonna make a little bit more of this flesh tone that I made earlier. A little bit of light, and I'm actually not too worried if I put too much light color into this time, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this flesh tone to clean up underneath the eye. So I'm going to actually, in the same concept that I overpainted the borders of all of the Ranger Slayers so far, I'm going to now match a border, the border of her flesh and her eyes. So I'm going to bring the flesh up to her eye here, and I'm going to bring her flesh down to where I want the eyeliner to end from the top. And that's all I'm going to do here. So let's see how small I want to make this go. And I'm just going to touch, I'm just going to shrink this eye a little bit. So here we go. Just a little bit, and make that socket look a little normal, a little more normal. I'm going to take that coat up at the eyebrow here, and I'm going to paint that on, and I'm going to clean up the edge here too, so just there, up on the side of her eye. Now that looks a little bit better, doesn't it? That looks a lot better. That looks more like a human, but she's got eyeliner. So there we go. There we are. I'm gonna touch up a little bit here as well. It looks like some of the flesh got onto my white. That's fine. I'm just gonna pull it off. It's still wet, so I can still move it. This is why we thin our paints with a little bit of water, because that way, if you need to pull it off, it's still wet. You have a little bit of working time. There's a little bit of forgiveness on it. And I think I'm just gonna just touch that there, blend that out. More human looking eye. I'm gonna do it on the other side. I'm gonna flip her upside down. I'm gonna do it again. And you can do this in thin layers. If it's not looking right off the get-go, that's fine too. But work in, like, what I'm doing is I'm basically drawing these really thin lines underneath her eye like this with my brush. So just thin line right under. I'm going to try to keep the color of the flesh under her eye a little lighter than her flesh on, like if I'm going to err on the side, if I can match it, great. But I'm going to try to keep it a little bit lighter rather than a little bit darker, because if I put a really dark under eye, she just looks old. Nobody wants that. So there's the first underneath, and then I'm going to go over her eye here and just paint that. I'm tilting her quite a bit, but this is how I paint eyes. So I overpaint the border, I overpaint the edge, and then I shape the eye to match afterwards. And the eyes don't have to match. They're sisters, not twins. And there we are. We got eyeliner. We got a pupil. She doesn't look like an anime character anymore. She's looking pretty solid. So that's where we are on Amy Jo there. Or on Kimberly Ann. Sorry, Amy Jo Johnson. I know she's doing, actually, I thought I saw someone post today that she's actually doing like a live stream concert. The actress who played Kimberly Hart on the show. So that seemed neat. I'm gonna be checking that out. Let me know. We're back on the idea of, the idea of what music. We're back on the music topic again. That's a good question. Let me know, chat. Would Amy Jo Johnson be on Kimberly Ann Hart's playlist? Like, would she be following this artist on Spotify or have her in her iTunes? Would she be a fan? I think that'd be it's a fun thing to speculate when worlds collide. So we've got face, we've got eyes. Now we're gonna start doing some other fun stuff, I think. The big thing that helps define faces is eyebrows. A lot of miniatures don't have it sculpted on, so this is something you're kind of gonna have to freehand a little bit. But it's not scary. You don't have to worry about doing it if you've never done it before. Especially with someone who has hair as light as Amy Jo Johnson. The thing you can instead do is just paint the top socket. Remember how I said you want to keep this flesh tone as you paint it up to the eye a little bit lighter? You can just paint the top socket a little bit darker. It also gives that same dimension of the brow bone, because what you're trying to do is define that brow bone, so they just don't look surprised all the time. So I'm going to do that in here. I'm going to take a little bit of a darker color. I'm just going to paint in that right now. And again, there's still that hint of eyeshadow. And let me see here. I think I'm going to tidy up that eyeliner a little bit. I'm working in very thin coats, so it's drying super fast on me, which is nice because it means I can continue to layer on these paints. But ultimately, when it comes to following the eye and painting on the eyeliner, try to follow the socket, I think, is the big one. So I'm going to clean up that eye socket, and I'm just going to give her a little flick at the end, and it gives a hint of eyelashes. So you can see there, just a little flick. I extend the eyeliner out a little bit and it flicks out. That's actually an old vintage makeup trick. In the 40s and 50s mascara, you couldn't really get it. They sold black makeup in these pots, and you had to mix a little bit of water into it, and then you would paint your eyelashes with it to darken them, but it wasn't like mascara that built up lashes. And then you painted like that Barbie like bedroom eye line on top, and that little flick at the end was to again re-emphasize the eyelash line to fake it. So there's a little bit more makeup trivia you probably didn't need. We're going to be talking a lot about makeup in terms of applying it to a face on this model here. You can take these tricks and also apply it to Rita as well, because I think those might be the only miniatures with female faces, like actual faces, in the game so far. So that's what we've got. So I'm going to take a highlight and I'm going to paint that highlight up on the cheek. It's a little bit, it's just the skin tone with a little bit of the beige mixed in. So if you actually look, there's a bit of a striation here. There's a darker tone, more of that original flesh tone on this side, and then I have a little bit of lighter color on this side. I'm going to take that color and I'm going to wash it on the high parts of this cheekbone here and over here. And all I'm going to do is what I'm trying to recreate is light bouncing off these high points. So the high point of the cheekbone. And then I'm also going to take it down. So I'm going to hit the middle of the forehead. I'm going to hit the nose bridge, and I'm going to take it all the way down her nose bridge as well. So that's just a touch on there. And we're going to do it on this side here. So we're going to take that lighter tone and just paint it on. Just like that. So, and again, this is like the miniature version of what you see makeup Instagrammers do. If you ever want to see, if you're ever trying to figure out how do I paint a miniature face, it's interesting because I watch a lot of drag queens do it on YouTube. Because what they're doing is they're re-sculpting their facial structure with the illusion of light and shadow. And that's not that much different than what we're doing with paint on a miniature. And they exaggerate certain features with that really light highlight underneath the eye and on the cheekbone and up on the forehead and down the nose bridge. And they are able to recede a wider chin with shadow. I don't think we're going to need to do that much on this sculpt. We can just play with what's there, but that'll help give you kind of an idea. So I've got her cheek highlights on there. Now I'm going to take that flesh tone again. I'm going to do the wide part of her forehead, her nose bridge, and just take that down. I'm painting in very thin layers. This paint is thinned down. I don't normally, like for my base coats, I usually say paint with layers that are the consistency of like a half and half. You'll get coverage, but it'll also like it won't have texture. It won't be clumpy. When I'm painting on faces, I'll thin it down all the way to like as thin as skim milk, because I want a little bit of that transparency of the paint. I want to work with the undertone skin color I already painted, and I want to work with that, and I can build up layers to build up those highlights, but it makes it easier to blend out, because when you do makeup on a person's face, the big step that happens all the time is they're always blending. They're trying to avoid harsh lines, and that's what we're trying to do by blending our paints and painting in thin coats, is you avoid the harsh lines, but you get the effect of highlight and shadow. And so that's what we're doing here. We're going to blend a little bit of light color up on her forehead, nearly all the way to her brow bone, and I'm going to use that thinned color out. If it's a little too light, I'll just mix a little bit more flesh tone and I'll blend that down again, but it doesn't have to be perfect. So there we go. I don't know if you can see that. I've got highlights on her nose, on her brow bones, on her cheeks. The light is washing it out a little bit. Didn't Amy Jo sing a song on the show once? I thought she did. I think I remember that episode. Let's have a quick peek into Twitch here and see what's happening in chat over there. It looks like it's pretty quiet. Will John be using my miniatures on the paintings? Maybe. I mean, I think it's one of those things where the miniatures look great painted, but they also look great unpainted on streams, monkey boats. So I think that we'll see. We'll see. I'm a slow painter. I'm not gonna lie. I can blast through a good number of putties pretty quick, but these characters, I do want to take my time to paint them nicely and paint them in a way that is interesting. But also like when it can be intimidating. I'm not gonna lie. Part of the reason why I love painting on streams and showing you what I do as a painter is because I believe that you can do this too. It might take a little more practice, might take a little more time, but I believe you can do this. I believe that everything I'm showing you is not a super special technique. It's not super hard. It really is just a matter of practice and developing the fine motor control muscles in your hands and wrists to get there. Um, and when people see a fully painted set on the table, they can immediately be intimidated by that. And that's the last thing I want. I don't want people to think that when they see miniatures painted that they have to be painted in any way, shape, or form. I don't want people to ever think that they can't enjoy their game however they want, or feel intimidated by the standard that other people are painting miniatures at. That is the last thing I ever want any fan or player or gamer or hobbyists to feel is intimidated. So I think that playing on stream with the miniatures as they come, it helps with accessibility, but at the same time, who knows? You know, things can change if we can get more stuff painted. Things, with our regular live streams every week on Mondays, normally you're watching someone play. I think that, seeing a cool painted miniature every once in a while on there might be really fun. So who knows? I've got the cheeks highlighted. I've got the forehead highlighted. It looks dried down. Let's get some bronzer. So I'm going to take this original dark color of skin. And the reason why I like to mix with this color is because this is a darker color on a lot of skin tones. And it's a nice bronzer color. So I'm going to treat this color like it's bronzer. And so where that shade is going to go is up into the hairline at the top here. I'm going to paint it on really thin, almost transparent. It's going to go up into the hairline where the shadow is, so you can actually see with the light on my head right now, kind of in that shaded area. I'm gonna touch a little bit in towards the temples here to kind of bring the face out and keep the highlighted areas more highlighted. And I'm gonna try to hit underneath the cheekbones here. I'm gonna kind of draw these two lines down the sides of her cheeks, and then I'm gonna blend them out. We're gonna keep it pretty transparent though. So this is just like light washes of color, but this will help give her a little bit of dimension in her face so it just doesn't look flat. So we're gonna go in and up into her hairline. I'm just gonna paint that original skin tone. I'm gonna paint it up into her temples a little bit, just outwards from her eyes, and I'm just gonna add that shading in up there. And I'm going to take that original color, a little bit of water, and I'm going to paint in. So from the ear, it's going to go down this way, underneath the cheekbone. So if my cheekbone's up here where it's catching all the light, just right in here. You can kind of see that shadow on camera right here. But right in here, right? You can kind of see that little bit of shade where the light is catching up at my cheekbone and shading this down area. That's kind of where we want to hit with that wash of color. So we're going to go in here. And I'm going to paint that in just a little bit. It's not a lot, and it's pretty subtle, but it will make a difference in terms of giving her face a little more dimension. And a little bit there. And then what I'm going to do afterwards is I'm going to blend this out by taking that same, her original kind of flesh tone color and just doing a wash over it. So it's a little bit lighter, and it'll push that harsher line back. So if you can see there's like a harsh line painted on the side of her cheek right there. That we're going to push back with a wash of color of her base skin tone afterwards. So I'm not too worried of how it's going to look right now. I'm not terribly stressed. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the opportunity. I don't know how long it's going to last. I might have to clean it up afterwards. I'm going to put just a touch right under her lip here. It makes her lips look a little bit fuller, and it'll emphasize her lip when we put a little bit more color on it too. So that's where we're at for the shading. It's pretty subtle, but it's not crazy, but That's where it's looking like right now. And let's see here. I'm gonna need to hear "Happy Little Minis" at least a couple more dozen times per episode. Great work. Oh, thank you, Price. I don't. You know, it's funny because like I'm not. I don't think of myself as a Bob Ross type. I love Bob Ross. I do. I grew up watching him. My father loved him a lot. And I loved his approach. It's just so zen listening to him. But I feel like I have a more Rachel Ray kind of thing. Like that's my energy is more up than it is down. I don't know if anyone's ever actually seen like a Zen Terry. That's not the kind of energy I have. So I feel like Rachel Ray is more my jam, but I've never seen her paint anything, so I don't know what that would look like. I've seen her cook a lot. I think that's what it is. So we're gonna do that wash of flesh over her little bronzer. Again, this is really thin. If I was to paint this onto the white right now, you would see the white right through it. It's not a ton. And we're just gonna push that in a little bit. So when I say push it in, it's just a coat of the base coat, and it blends. It's like an easy, cheat way to blend two colors together. So if you have a harsh line, if you put the base coat on it, it kind of blends that color out a little bit more. And it takes away the harshness of that line. So I've put the blending layer on. Let's cover up I'm going to touch her nose just a little bit here because her eye socket, I looked at it straight and I'm not really happy with the shape of her eye right in the corner here. So I'm just touch that up. And I'm going to put some lipstick on her. We'll do some blush and lipstick. Blush is really, really interesting. So when you put blush on skin, in the blush pan, it's just this bright, whatever color you're using, pink, rouge, brick, whatever, peach. I don't know what tones there are for blush, but it's just color. But when you actually apply it to the skin and the color marry because it's just a slight wash of color. If you put the color of that blush product onto skin, it would just look like clown makeup if it was truly the color it looks like in the pan. That's what we're going to try to replicate when we do blush on this model. I'm going to take that magenta color I had, and I'm going to thin it out in water. I'm going to take a little bit of the flesh tone that we did as a base, and I'm going to mix them together until there's just this like soft rougey tone. It's going to look a little bit like the flesh and a little bit of the pink, but that's what we're going for. We don't want just pink on the face. It doesn't look right. We want the flush of the color. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a little bit of that pink, we're going to just add it to the apple of the cheek here, and we're going to put it on pretty transparent. So I'm just going to push that out right there. Just like that. It's really subtle. It's not all that much. And then we're going to push that in again with the same flesh tone too. Again, to marry the colors. I can't emphasize enough. What we're trying to do here, what we're shooting for, is to marry colors on the face. This is like your ultimate blending course. And if you can do this, cloth is easy. If you understand the fundamental of apply a wash of color, with the detail, with the color, with whatever you're going to do, and then washing it over with the base tone. We're going to do flesh. We're going to do the cloth just like we're doing the flesh right now, but we're going to do it on a bigger scale. So I'm going to let that dry, and I'm going to do her lip as well. Her lip is going to be the same kind of approach. I'm going to take the darker flesh tone instead of the light true flesh tone. I'm going to use the base color of the flesh. I'm going to mix with just a touch. These tiny, tiny amounts, the very tip of my brush. And I'm going to lean more towards the color of the pink and less towards the color of the flesh. And I think I'm going to actually take some of the lighter pink as well. The trick of lipstick and like even natural skin tones is, depending on your skin color, you have to adjust for whether or not the lip is darker or lighter. And For a miniature like this, I want to marry the pinks that I'm using on the rest of the model into her face so it all looks uniform. So I'm not going to use a different color than what I have on my palette. And I'm just going to, let's try this pink here. And I'm just going to paint it on her lips. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to get the shape of the lip right. Really what you're trying to do is just get the expression of the lip. Is it upturned? Is it slightly downturned? Is it, if you can capture that, and it's sculpted on too, so if you can capture that, that's what success looks like. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna put a little bit of her lip on. To me, she looks unhappy. I'm using the art as the guide here, so she's got a little bit of a pout. Her lips are slightly downturned, so the top of her lip is a little more curved, and the bottom of her lip is a little more straight. That's the general shape I'm going for. So you've got a slightly grumpy, pouty expression, looking kind of intense. So it looks like the cheeks have dried. And I'll show you up here. It looks a little harsh right now, but I'm going to blend that in, again, with a thin wash of the original flesh tone here. Let's see, and we're gonna do this. We're just gonna wash that color over, that flesh tone over, and we're gonna blend those colors. And if there's a little bit of a line still from that darker bronzer tone, it'll blend together. So you have these very thin washes of color across the miniature, and that's what gives the face the dimension. These undertones, they're just really subtle differences in flesh tone. They're not like these huge streaks of paint across a face. And that's it. So I've got her face, I think, mostly done. I think that looks pretty good to me. I might do some more washes on there. I might, you know what, I think I do want to highlight a little bit more along her cheekbone here and just blend that out a little bit. But really, I think she's looking pretty solid. I think she's looking really solid. The thing with the pink that I used for her cheeks is it's a little darker, so it actually is, it's looking like a little, it looks a little shady, and like not shady in a good way. It looks a little darker for me. So I want to blend that out a little bit with a little bit of a highlight along the cheekbone again, and re-emphasize that because I think it took away some of that impact of that particular color. There we go. There we are. Okay, any questions? We talked a lot about makeup and we haven't even touched on cloth yet. So, whew, that is let me see if I can, that's just water. I wash my brushes so vigorously. I got water on my Ranger Slayer cape, but it's actually dry. She's dry, which is fine. It's a little splotchy. It's not perfect, but that's okay. We're gonna work with that. I am going to start with, let's see here if we can get this done. This is going to be a pretty quick paint. Let's go with a little bit of pink from the original base coat on here. And I'm going to start with the cloak, I think. Yeah, I'm going to start with the cloak. So, a little bit of pink, a little bit of white. So I'm going to pull with a clean brush some of the white into the pink. And we're going to start doing some crazy unfancy highlights. With the thin paint, it's kind of easy to see where the shadows would be because it kind of sunk into the creases, and on the higher edges where there isn't as much paint, there's a little more light to it. It looks lighter, and that's what we're going to use. I'm going really rough here, and I'm kind of sketching out the highlights. It's probably going to look a little more like some of the comic book art, because the highlights are pretty extreme, but this isn't as extreme as like straight white highlights. And I'm just going to sketch that out a little bit. I'm not going to be particularly fussy, because that's not my goal. I'm just trying to put that light on there. You can also dry brush this layer on. This would be a good time to like leverage, pull out your dry brush and do that. But I'm going to do it with wet paint here. And I'm just going to hit kind of the higher points with that lighter white color. Again, I'm not particularly fussy, I'm not picking out too hard. I'm not going to be too fickle about it, because I think I want a little bit of that sketchy texture to it. It's a little more, it looks like the hand of the artist is on the model, I guess, is kind of what I'm looking at. I'm not afraid of brush strokes here. I'm not afraid of visible brush strokes in this moment, because I think for that comic book style that I'm kind of leaning towards, it's been something I've been practicing on a few of the other original Mighty Morphin Rangers as well. This is a nice, easy way to kind of lean into that a little bit. We're not going to go full comic book, black, white, hard edge highlighting, and black lining. I'm not going to take you there today, but I am going to show you a little bit of how to kind of get the most of that method on this mini today. So this is all I'm doing. You can kind of see there's just big pink swaths of light pink paint on a brighter pink paint. It's just the base coat of pink with a little bit of white mixed in. Right? So I'm getting the shape of the highlights on there. I'm also going to do the edges just a little bit, because I think that when you have the edges fraying, I'm going to do some weathering on them. Got some time. But I want to capture some of that the edges will catch the light more, just by nature of how ragged they are. They will catch the light. So I'm going to kind of go on the edge there and just pick them out. I'm not being particularly fussy or fancy right now. Just getting that pink highlight on that cloth. And I think that's kind of more what I'm looking for. I want to keep some of the shadows. So like in the creases, you can see that there are shadows in there. I want to keep some of that. So I'm not being too fussy about like getting full coverage. And I'm also, part of the reason why I want to keep some of those brush strokes in there is that brush stroke kind of emulates the way light reacts, in that there are like these little swaths of light catches on fabric a little bit. And that's all I've done. I've just done, like, basically you could replicate this with dry brushing, but I've layered it. I've done a transparent kind of light highlight on everything on the cloak there to see how that works. Let's see here. And that's how that's looking. Any questions so far? This is pretty straightforward. Once we get the cloak done, it's really mostly just black on this miniature and getting the black on there, and you have like 95% of the miniature done. So there's the cloak, and then we're gonna go in. I think I'm gonna take this darker magenta color. I'm gonna do a wash over it, but I think I want to take the white more extreme. So within that light pink shade, I'm gonna take even more white, and I'm gonna go brighter, lighter, like almost nearly white on those highlights. And within the strokes that I've already painted, I'm just going to do an even thinner letter coat. Again, I kind of want transparency on this. This is just like on the face. I'm not looking for coverage. I'm looking for the hint of color, and it'll blend better if I use slightly thinner paints than I normally would. And so yeah, we're just gonna go with it. And we're going to add that wash on. My tips ran a little bit. I'm just going to spin it on my wet palette to bring my brush bristles together again. And we're going to go for it. Just in on those highlights. Big areas, little areas. I'm using both the tip and the sides of my brush to catch those. But I mostly, because I want those brush strokes, I'm going to lean towards the tip of my brush a little more. Whereas when I was painting with the base coat, I was looking at using more of the sides of my brush just to get bigger coverage areas quicker. So here we go, and we'll just add those streaks on. And they are kind of streak-like. Fabric is like that though. Light on fabric it kind of looks a little streaky. It's fine. What we want to avoid is hesitation. Try not to make sure your lines look like they want to be there. Paint with confidence. This is when you're just like, yeah, it looks crazy, but it's okay. I'm going to make this look good. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to do the edges again in that really bright pink. It's not true white. It looks like white on the camera, but it's not true white. It's got a little bit of that pink in there. Again, because we're trying to marry these colors together. That's what we're doing with these washes. I know before on a previous stream with Goldar, I talked a lot about dry brushing. Today we're going to talk about washes and the power of thin paint. So I'm just going to do a little bit on the edge of those circles and her cloak as well. This is crazy looking. Okay, I'm not going to lie. This is pretty insane. This is a lot of white lines. It is not blended. It does not look right yet. That's okay. We're gonna get there. And I'm just gonna throw on these blends just a little bit, and just kind of where I'm seeing the edge of color and the edge of the light to shine through. That's kind of what we're trying to hit. So there we are. That is some of the highlights on this cloak. I'm really exaggerating here. This is something that I know some people might feel really uncomfortable with looking at a model right now. That's normal. That's totally reasonable because this looks crazy. But also, that discomfort is part of the process, right? When you're painting with these different techniques, as you get better, you'll start to realize that your miniature has a curve to it that at certain points, before you get the finish washes on, before you get to the finishing details, it looks very, very obviously not done, not even close done. And when you're at that stage, it almost feels like sometimes you shouldn't have put paint on the model at all. Once you get past that point, though, that's when everything starts to come together and coalesce, and you start to see the color blocks come together, and you start to realize, oh, this is looking really good now. That pit is part of every model's progress, so you got to power through it. There's no other way to do it. You just have to power through it. So right now, I'm just going to take a little bit of that base pink I had, and I'm going to take that magenta in on my palette. And so it's like this wash. It's very thin. When I take it onto my palette, it beads together. It does some crazy stuff. I'm not going to add soap to this right yet. I kind of want it to adhere and bubble and kind of act a little more natural in terms of color, because I do want this to blend together with the high points as well as the low points. So I'm not going to mix any paint into it. I want to see how it dries first. And I'm just going to take that thin paint coat. It's just this base pink with this darker magenta. So it's like a midpoint color. And that's the color I'm going to wash everything with. So it's going to create the shadows on the cloak. It's going to blend those highlights in. And it's going to give me that, it's going to blend down that color and marry it with the base color of the cloak, while also retaining the highlights. I'm going to push this all the way back. And I might have to do a few coats of this to kind of get to a point where I think, oh, that looks right. The highlights are there now. That's fine. That's normal. You might have to reshape some of your highlights and come in again with your base color of pink and then wash it over again to reshape the highlights once you see how it settles. That's normal. So this is what that wash looks like. I'm just throwing it on and I'm going to let it blend the highlights down to the base. And yeah, we're going to let that dry. Any questions in chat so far about what's going on here now? This is looking a little more crazy, but we're using the same techniques as we did on the face onto this cloak. And I'm probably going to take that same darker magenta tone and tone down that pink again. And this is the pink that I used on the Zeo pink, and this is the pink I used on the Mighty Morphin Pink Ranger. So there is a harmony and a color story for all the Pink Rangers, but that wash of magenta changes it a little bit. It gives it a little more dimension. They still look like the same colors, but one looks a little more distinct. These are the little things that you can do to kind of bring out extra details out of your miniatures. Let's have a look what's happening in Twitch. I haven't seen any song suggestions. Oh, it's like an advanced coloring book, to be honest. Yes, painting miniatures. Noodles to go. You are so right. It is, painting a miniature is more like paint by number than it is like painting on a canvas, like drawing. It's much more like a coloring book because of the fact that the sculpt tells you where the color should go, right? So that's kind of that. Let's see here. I think we're gonna do Rebel Ranger Slayer's hair now. I've got a variety of browns here, and I'm gonna probably dip into that ivory color again. It's a little bit brown. And we are gonna paint a streak of pink in there. I think that would make me happy, and that's the point of painting miniatures, to make yourself happy. So I'm gonna take a little bit of that brown. I want a brown she's a dirty blonde color, like her color's that slightly darker blonde. So what I think I might do is I might just put a little bit of this down, and I'll blend it with some of my ivory towards the tips, and I'll paint some streaks in as well. So we're just gonna paint her hair with this brown, and then I'll come in it again and throw in some dimensional streaks in there with that mixing a little bit of that lighter ivory, which kind of works as a blondish highlight. And then I'll do a streak of pink in there at the end, because I think that would be really cool. So here we go. It's pretty straightforward. It's looking good. She's looking fab. So here we are. If you notice, yes, I'm working on 2 miniatures. This is something that I often do. It's probably a reason why I don't often paint with handles as well, is because I work on a number of models at the same time, so that while they're drying, I've got something else going, and I'm not handling the miniature while it's drying. So here is the hairline up here, and it's slightly undershaved, but I'm gonna say, like, it's not like bald. It's the color of her hair on top in the back of her head for her undercut is peeking through. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually do a wash of the hair color on top of the flesh color and marry those, so there's like a hint of hair on it to give it that dimension and that feeling like, yeah, she's not bald in the back, she's just growing it out. It's like a weird cut. She's growing it out. It's fine. And I'm getting the underside of the hair. Not too fussy about like being perfect, because there's going to be hair wherever you paint it. The trick about hair is on miniatures, it doesn't have to be sculpted on there for it to be there. You can paint mustaches on any miniature, honestly. You can paint beards on any miniature, honestly. You can paint stubble, 5 o'clock shadow. That's something you can fake. You can paint eyebrows on miniatures. And now that I have her kind of base hair color, I think I'm going to throw her on her eyebrows as well. Because it's now on my palette. I've got that color there. So what I'm going to start, I'll do the eyebrows first, actually, because I know I'm going to touch the back of her head with my hands. I don't want to smudge that. And let's see here. What else do I have? I'm going to go with this. I'm going to thin it out just a little bit. Now, with eyebrows, it really helps to really thin down your color. Because if you make a mistake, you can just go over it with the flesh tone again, fix it, erased, try again. And if you use a really thin like layer to put that first line down. If you're happy with it and you want to strengthen that, you can just put another line on top of it. You can trace it. It's way harder to try to cover it up if you put like a bright, it looks like paint again, right? So like the color of my hair it's pretty black. My eyebrow isn't quite as black because you see that flesh peeking through. So you can actually keep the eyebrows pretty transparent, but that color on the brow bone really does make a difference in terms of defining the face. So we're gonna do that thin coat. I'm just gonna paint one right here, just like that, at the top of the brow bone. And then I'm gonna come in and I'll turn her upside down and do the same one on the other side. Again, don't have to match. And because her hair is on that side too, because it's flicked that way, I'm not gonna try to fuss too much about the eyebrow in there. I'll let it kind of, the hair flick kind of touches on that eyebrow anyways, so I'm not too worried about it. But she's got eyebrows, helps define the face. I can keep going. That same transparent brown color will now go onto the back of her head. I'm just gonna paint it as a wash of color. That's all. So like the color that she's growing out and painting on. And what I'm also gonna do is I'm gonna paint some of these lines that go down the back of her head where it looks like the sculpt is shaving it. I'm gonna paint a few hairs on there too. I'm gonna give the illusion of hair. And just like that. So it's not perfect. And I'm gonna wash that with the brown color so it gives it the illusion of like, hey, there's actually like hair here. So I'll take that same very thin transparent coat of color that I did for the eyebrows, and I'm gonna just cover the back of her head with it, and we'll let it be. If you want to keep her bald in the back, like a true hard tight shaved undercoat, that's fine too. But that coat of color kind of gives the hint that hair is there, but it's thinner. It's been shaved. You can see through it. It's more transparent. That's what I'm trying to go for, and I think that'll work. So it has that. If you look there, you can kind of see it gives that illusion. It's right at the hairline there. That, hey, there's hair there. It's just real short. You can see through it. You can see skin tone underneath it. And I'm just gonna wash. I can bring a second wash on there. Take it down a little bit darker if I want. I'm pretty happy with that. I think that it's where I want it to be. It's placed behind the ears. And if I wanna add a little more gradation there, so it's like she's got a fade going on, you can do that too. But I'm not too concerned about that. I don't think she's that concerned about the back of her head. There we go. And so we've got the base of her hair done. Let's paint some streaks through it now. I'm gonna do some highlights with the ivory tone mixed into my base tone. And we're gonna do kind of the same technique as we did with the cloth, to be perfectly honest. This is the same kind of like, we're gonna paint some crazy highlights, we're gonna wash it down again, and then we're gonna to blend it a little bit together. It doesn't have to be as blended. I don't know how much heavier you want it. This is a pretty red brown. I think she was more ash than this, so I'm just gonna let the blonde kind of be more prominent on this base coat, and I'm not gonna do as heavy a wash. And if I like the way the highlights look as is, I'm not gonna bother washing it. It's only if it starts to look kind of mucky. But I think it looks pretty good actually with this color. With the ivory mixed in, it's got that more of that ashy blonde, dirty blonde tone to it, and because you've got those streaks of brown in there, kind of mixing it up a little bit with the blonde highlights, and that's actually looking pretty dimensional. Maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's Clairol. I don't know. There we go. We've got her hair done. We're gonna put that streak of pink in there. I'm gonna not do what I've been saying about like makeup. I'm just going to paint that streak bright and right. It's going to be right in the front here. I'm going to take that murderous magenta. It seems like the right color for her. I'm going to take that right in here, and I'm going to go whoop. Just flip that out. Whoop. I'm going to curl that up there. And we'll do another one this way. I think 2 streaks make me happy. And whoop. It's that super punky kind of color. Boom. And then that. That's our hair. Right there. Got a couple streaks of pink in there. I love the way it looks. And there's a whole lot of black on this one, hey? So, let's get the black on, and then we'll get the black on the Ranger Slayer as her cloak's still dry. But that's looking pretty married, and it's looking pretty highlighted and fancy. She's looking pretty fancy. That cloth has all the highlights, got the shades. It's got some brush strokey in there. If I want to smooth out some of those highlights, I can always do another wash. But we're going to move on to the black, I think. I'm going to get a little more black on the palette. I think I'm going to need it. There's a lot of black on here. So I'll do another drop just so that I've got it going. And I'm going to thin all of this down. And we're going to get rolling on it. It's time to get busy. So Ranger Slayer has, I'm going to paint her whole bow black, because I know I've got silver coming up on top of it. I don't want the pink to poke through. So black on her bow, black on her boots, black on her tights, black on her chest piece around the diamonds. Belt is white, which we can do afterwards. Black on the helmet in the front and the back. Black just about everywhere. Okay, cool. Gotcha. Let's go. Let's just do this. So let's get the black on. And we're gonna just, again, I'm being careful not to try to hit the pink parts that I know I want to keep pink, but black as a whole, pretty forgiving color. In terms of like coverage, it hides pretty well. You do the challenge on painting on white primer is you do want to make sure that any of the parts that are the harder to reach ones aren't poking through with white. Like, it shouldn't, like, put it down on the table and look. If you're seeing them poke through, go on and put another, get your brush in there and get another coat of paint in there. But don't stress about it too much. We're just going to go, because I want to paint silver on top of the bow, and I'm going to use a tiny little dry brush to do that. For the silver parts, there's a bit of red on there too, which is something that we can just dot on afterwards, after all of this is dry. But we need to get the black on first. And we're just gonna get the paint on. We'll let it go. You just have to trust. There's a lot of black on this miniature. The reason why I primed it white first is because I wanted the pink to pop. If you want to prime black, it'll just take a few more coats to get the pink on, but you probably will be more careful and paint around the black rather than the way I did it. It's really up to you how you want to do it. There's no wrong way if the end result is what makes you happy. I don't know if I can say that often enough or emphasize that enough. The right way to paint your miniatures, the right way to do any technique, is the way that makes you happy, the way that gives you the result you want. And you might not have a method down if you're just starting out. You might not know what your right way is, but you'll get there. Give it time and give yourself space to experiment and try stuff and just go at it. I'm painting out of frame because this handle's so big. I'm sorry. But here we are. Getting the black on the bow. Not too fussy about this back side of the model because you're not going to see it that much from the directions. All those shadows are going to hide it. So that's not a stressor for me. I'm not gonna be worried about that. Let's have a look here. And we're just going to go in on the thighs, in on the boots, and we're just going to get black on there. Now, if you wanted, you could use the same techniques that I've been using in terms of like the cloak. And instead of painting all the black on this ranger, like on our tights black, you could paint them gray and then do a black wash on top. That is totally a great way to do it. I find that right with the style of these miniatures, the sculpt of them, color blocks look great. Like, I don't want to discourage someone from like really going ham. If they want to go ham, they want to go and mix up their techniques and go full on ham with the color of the miniature and like really do crazy highlights and go crazy with it. I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you, I'm probably gonna come back here and add more details on top of the color blocks. But if you paint a base level with blocked color nice and clean on any ranger, you can always go in and add more details later, even on a matte spray. I know I talked maybe a little too much about finishing sprays and matte sprays, but one of the things that matte spray is also itself a primer. Because it has these fissures in its surface, it holds on to paint pretty well. So you can use your finishing spray as another base coat level, like a transparent primer, and go back again onto your minutes, revisit your miniatures, and paint them with more details. Add more details. You can always do that once you've got the color blocks done. But I think the most dramatic impact on the table is having the color blocks on the miniature. The silhouette of the miniature and the scale of the miniature, when you put those color blocks on there, it really defines the character of the model. You get the attitude right away. And it's one of the reasons why I've said before, like, even if all you do is take your transparent spray coat on your miniature and you use that as a primer on your rangers, and all you do is paint the white diamonds on them, that's all you do, just the white diamonds, you immediately get the character because they're so well defined. The color and those white diamonds on the Mighty Morphin Rangers, that's all you need. You can add a silver in there and you've got their weapons. That's all you really need. If you have a white, a silver, a gold, a black, you can use the color of the miniature and paint those basic details and make them look really good, really fast, and not have to stress about it, like just the color blocks. You don't have to get really involved in it. You don't have to be painting faces, for example, to capture the essence of the character. And I encourage you to, if you're watching this and you're new and you just want to try it out, that's where I would start. You don't have to have perfectly detailed miniatures. These are your game pieces. And if you put a little bit of white on them, I promise they'll look better than without the white. And if you put a little bit of black on their visors, I promise they'll look a lot better than they did without any paint. And if you put a little bit of metallic on them to finish their last details up, you'll be surprised how good they look with just basic paints. Like 4 paints, it's remarkable. It's remarkable. So, black on boots, black on most of the tights. I'm getting there. And yeah, have we built any songs from the playlist for Ranger Slayer here? What is she listening to? Like, I am gonna say she probably listens to, it's the 90s Amy Jo Johnson, or it's Kimberly and Power Rangers, and very 90s show. She's probably listening to a lot of Hole, probably a Courtney stan. I'll go on a limb and say that. If anyone wants to dispute me, go ahead and chat. Let me know how I'm wrong. She probably listens to Veruca Salt. I think she she, she's got that angry guitar heavy tone. What else? I don't know. Maybe this will be a fun thing. Maybe I'll make a Spotify playlist. I'll post it in the Power Rangers Here's a Great Group, under the off topic section, and throw out some ideas there for what I think she'd be listening to. And you can let me know if there are any additions I should be making, or any edits to that list I should also be making, because I think that would be pretty fun. So there we go. We'll get the detail in here. We've got the color blocks coming on. I'll paint the strapping in between these thigh straps here. Like, really focus on what you can see when it comes to painting miniatures. I think that is the best advice. Focus on what you can see. Ignore the rest. If you can't see it, no one's gonna know. No one's gonna know that you didn't perfectly paint the underside of the cape right up against her shoulders perfectly. There could be primer under there. No one's gonna see it when the miniature's on the table. So spend your time on the parts of the miniature that you can see. Spend your time working on the areas that have the most attention. Spend your time on the helmets. Spend your time on those details that define the character, on the weapons, because those are the things that really help define the character and will help define their presence on the table and make them immediately identifiable as who they are from like 10, 15 feet away. And worry about the details you can see at 3 feet away, not at 3 inches away, because we look at minis very close and we can see all the little mistakes, but I promise you, when you're playing with them and you've got like a whole table full of putties around them or other foot soldiers around them, that is what you'd be looking at here. I have a quick bit in terms of what else I have going on. Let's see here. Anything else happening? Now, it looks okay. Any questions from chat here? Alright. So, I've got... Let's see. Let me see here. How are we doing? Oh, we're still got 15 minutes. We're going. We're rolling. And then I have this diamond here. We're going to get this done. I am pretty confident we're going to get enough done. This Ranger Slayer is going to look like a Ranger Slayer. So, I'm feeling good about that. Color blocking with black, given how much black there is on this miniature, is really going to make that miniature pop. Especially, so I've started her chest. And you can see already it's coming together really quick. And what I'm going to do after I get this black on is I'm going to do the same wash I did on her cape to give that magenta tone to her. I think that color can define her. It can make her look a little bit darker, a little bit grittier, but still like a pink ranger, and I think that's gonna make a difference. Let's see here. Her shoulder pads also have the black, and her gloves, there's a little bit of pink piping on them, but it looks like she's got black through, then she's got the piping on the glove, and then black again. Wow, there's a lot of details on these gloves too. If you really want to pick them out, you want to spend the time, go ahead, like, take your time on this. We've only got a little bit of time together, you and I, here on the stream, but so I'm trying to get her looking pretty good, so you can see what you can get done and how little it takes in terms of color. But when you're painting your miniatures, I do want to encourage you to just enjoy the process and definitely take the time. Definitely enjoy working through the color and the process of this whole project, because ultimately what you really want, and what you really want is to have something you're proud of, and have something that you can share with the people you play with, and maybe with the Renegade Painters group. But you don't want something that stresses you out. I hope that when you pick up a brush to paint your miniatures, you will feel happy and encouraged, and no matter the outcome, know that you are getting better and improving every time you pick up the brush. And I see every day in both Power Rangers Heroes the Great group, as well as in the Renegade Painters group, people who are posting miniatures for the very first time. And some of them are a little bit intimidated because they've seen others in the group who have many more years of experience posting photos, feeling as though they might not, match up. But every one of those miniatures is better than the first miniature I ever painted. The level of just willingness to just go at it, the enthusiasm, the pride, the effort, it all shows on the miniature, and I see it all, and I appreciate that. I don't think there's anyone in either of those groups, both because as communities they're really positive, which is so nice, who's ever looked at someone's miniature and left a nasty comment. That is not a welcome thing to do. We're not that community. But I think that what I see instead is people who are being really encouraging of other people, and that's really beautiful and joyous and nice to see. So I'm going to quickly check for Twitch comments. How are we looking? It doesn't look like there's any questions, so we're still going at it. Let's go. And so backs, the diamonds are nearly defined on the front. I'm not going to stress too much about the black on the back of the miniature. I can come back at that later. But honestly, paint her however you'd like. But the part of the mini that you can't see, that's the one that we don't need to worry about so much. So there we go. Black here on her arm, up against the palette there. I'm going to do the under arm here too, because I think that is going to help define that armoring on her arm here. And I'm going to come in on that with some pink and white. I think I'm going to pick that out a little bit and just help define it a little bit more. So I'm going to pick that black out, give it a little bit of a touch. There you go. Touch the brush. I'm going to touch up the pink. There's a little bit of transfer as I was moving my brush around. That's fine. You can always paint over it. That's not an issue. And I'll clean up that with a finer brush. I'm going to clean up that point in there of the black up in here to make those diamonds pop. Those clean lines, no hesitation. That's what we're looking for here. And we're gonna go. There we go. There we go. I'm gonna touch that there. That looks pretty Ranger Slayer-y right there. Already we have a defined silhouette. We have a really strong look with the shoulder pads. We're gonna do her shoulder pads and her helmet. And we'll have all the color blocks done. That's pretty exciting. So here we go. We're going to get that pink on or get the black on the pink on the helmet here. These blacks really define. There's so much black on this miniature, and it really does help define the character of the mini here. How's that looking? That looks pretty good. We'll come back around this way and we'll go around here. This way. Just like that. And there we are. Visor's done. Like, it's coming together fast. These, there's only like 2 colors, really 3 if we count the extra magenta in the wash, on this miniature. But you're getting a very clear sense of this character right off the bat with a little bit of this black here, and that's a testament to the character itself. That's a testament to the color story of the character design, and it helps that you have a sculpt that those details are already picked out for you. So all you have to do is just match it up. It's like a coloring book. What do we have here? Any questions from Twitch as we finish this up? We're coming up pretty close to time, but I'm confident we can get these color blocks on looking good, and then we can come back again maybe on another stream, and we can do up the finishing details. I can show you a level up. What does it look like from base coats? Let me know if you want that, Twitch and Facebook. If we come up from these base coats, what kind of techniques do you want to see? What would make you, like, what are the things you want to learn to level up from, say, a color blocked model like this, where I've got just the basic colors down, the palette's there, the shapes are defined. How do you want it to look? I've done a couple miniatures in the style of comic book art, so like black, white, extreme highlights, extreme shadows, black lining, that sort of thing, and they look really cool. Is that something you'd like to see? Would you like to see just kind of more refined techniques, stuff that steps a little bit away from the coloring, like the coloring book style, where it's just like color blocks and flat colors? Like, do you want to see definition, and what sort of definition would you want to see in the miniature? Like, how do you want me to paint it up? I saw someone in the Renegade, or the Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid group, ask me about like doing an alt paint job on one of the Green Rangers from a fan video, and that was really cool. I love the concept of that, and I'd love to show you how to do that. I think it includes actually includes some miniature conversion, so if you're interested in seeing that, let me know. I think that there are a lot of options here to level up this miniature, and that's something we can talk about a little bit. I think that when it comes to defining when a miniature is done, and is all personal preference, right? So if you're at the point where like getting the color blocks done and getting them looking good, getting your ranger looking like a ranger on the table, if that's done for you, fantastic, it's done. If you want to level that up and you want to add extra details and pick up extra highlights and emphasize extra elements of a model, and you want that, perfect, that's great too. We can go there. I think that's kind of the progression of every miniature painter and every hobbyist. Is they start with the basics, you handle the basics, and then you start experimenting, and you start coming back to the miniatures you've already painted and reevaluating them and figuring out, okay, what are the things that I would like to see to make this look better. All right, so I've got most of the black on there. I think I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to take a little bit of the white here, and I'm going to take a little bit of the pink, that light baby pink, cotton candy pink that I did on the streaks on the back cloth here. And I'm going to paint that color into the mask here on the mouth, just to help kind of shine it up a little bit. I don't know if that's actually silver or not. It might be silver. But in the comic book style, and I think I'm going to take this miniature into comic book style color scheme, It looks whitish. It's probably silver. Now that I think about it, it's probably silver, but I'm going to go with that. I'm going to take that same cotton candy pink, that really white mixed with this base pink here. I'm also going to define into these scales a little bit and just highlight them with that whitish pink color and brighten them up a little bit on the tops here and give it like a little bit of a non-metal metal sheen, as if light is bouncing off of these scales. It's a really cool armor effect. Just like that. There we go. The belt and the holster are white, so we can get that on for sure. And then I'm going to dry brush the silver on top. So let's do the white on the holster. And I can come back at this and refine the white. The white's going to take a couple coats anyways, so it's really hard to see under this cloak. I can't show you the miniature. But the white is going on there. Nice and easy. There we are. And there we go, there we go, there we go, there we go. And the belt. We're going to do the belt. Let's get the belt on white. Just like that. And there we are. There we go. Just like that. And I can paint the morpher belt buckle a little bit more, play with it a little bit more afterwards. We can take some silver into there. But the defining elements of this miniature are done. And that's kind of what we're shooting for, right? Like at this stage, and then I can come in afterwards. I think I'm going to come back. We'll come back and revisit the rest of Ranger Slayer. We'll call this Ranger Slayer Part 1. And we'll come back next stream and finish these details up. I really am interested in showing you some weathering techniques on the cloak. So I really want to come back at this and show you all of that. So we're going to call it today. Thank you so very much for joining. Thank you for saying hi in chat. Thank you for dropping in. I hope you paint your miniatures. I hope you join the Renegade painters group. I hope you also stop by the Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid group. If you aren't already, we're doing some fun stuff. I have some other stuff planned. There's a potato camera I've been using before. I can use again. I kind of blurred out a logo for Rise of the Psycho Rangers a couple weeks back. There might be some blurry photos showing up in the group this week for some other stuff. We're also going to be releasing the new scenario for Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid on Thursday, so please stop by, check out the Renegade Game Studios blog, renegadegames.com, or hit the Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid group up. Those are the places to get notified when that goes live. Thank you so much for tuning in and hanging out with me. I will see you in the group. If you are watching this on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe button. If you're watching on Facebook, do hit that like and say hi in the comments. If you have questions afterwards, I'll check up and try to answer them as best as I can. And if you're on Twitch, thank you so much for checking us out. Make sure you follow us so you know when we go live next time. I think that's it. I think we're all good. Until next time, thank you so much. Bye.